It is 3 in the morning, and you are awake because the man in the next tent is coughing. The canvas wall between you is no thicker than a bedsheet. You can hear every wet rasp of his lungs. You can hear him spit. You can hear him whisper something to nobody, and then the silence stretches a few seconds, and you wait, and he coughs again. Outside, the American River is running cold and black past Sacramento. October, 1849. The Sierra foothills are sharpening toward winter, and your wool blanket is damp from the inside out, your own breath condensing all night against the canvas. You are 26 years old. You came from a farm in New York State. 8 months ago, you boarded a ship at the Battery to sail around Cape Horn because a man in a tavern had shown you a glass jar full of yellow dust and said the rivers of California ran with it. The rivers do run with it. That part was true. Here is what the textbooks leave out. In the autumn of 1849, in the gold diggings outside Sacramento, 1 in 5 49ers would not see Christmas. Almost none of them died from a bullet. They died from the food, the water, and the absence of anyone who knew what to do about either. Before sunrise, you will understand why. Most of what you have been told about the California gold rush is a costume. The bearded man in the river, smiling at the pan in his hands, the mule, the whiskey bottle, the fortune made in a single afternoon. These images are real in the way a stage set is real. The surface is correct, and everything beneath it is missing. What is missing is the smell of the camp. What is missing is the food. What is missing is the man in the next tent, coughing himself to death over 4 days, while no one in California can do anything about it. What is missing is the simple fact that in the autumn of 1849, the gold diggings of the American River were one of the deadliest places in the English-speaking world, and the men who worked them knew it and kept digging anyway. Today we are going to spend one day there, one ordinary day in a tent on the river outside Sacramento. No doctors, no medicine that works, no fresh food, no way home for at least 4 months. It begins with a cold. You sit up slowly, because at 3 months in camp, nothing about your body moves the way it used to. Your hands open last. You uncurl the fingers one at a time. They are split along every knuckle, the cracks deep enough to show pink underneath, and they have not fully closed in weeks. The cold river water keeps them open. Your fingernails are black at the edges from gravel and silt. Your right thumbnail came off in September. The new one is growing in soft and ridged. You run your tongue along your teeth. 2 of them move. The gums have been bleeding off and on since August, a slow seepage that tastes like a copper coin and never quite stops. You have been eating salt pork and hardtack and beans for 11 weeks. There is no fresh fruit anywhere within 50 miles, and there will not be until a supply boat from San Francisco brings dried apples in November, at a price you cannot afford. This is scurvy. Nobody in camp calls it that yet. They call it land sickness, or the camp complaint, or just being run down. The cure is in any orange grove south of San Francisco. The cure might as well be on the moon. You pull on your boots. They are stiff with dried river mud, and the soles have begun to part from the uppers. Boots cost $30 in Sacramento, a week's clean earnings, and yours have to last another month. You step out of the tent. The latrine trench is 40 paces upslope from the tents, which is not nearly far enough. By the standards of 1849, it is considered well-sited. You squat over it in the dark. The smell is what you would expect, and worse, because it has been there since August, and the autumn rains have not yet come hard enough to wash anything away. 20 men use this trench. None of them are well. You wash your face in the river. The water is so cold your jaw seizes. You hold your breath and count to 5 before you can move again. You do not use soap. There is no soap in camp this week. The trader at the landing sold his last bar 2 days ago, and the next shipment is 4 days out. Soap, when there is any, costs more than tobacco. Breakfast is salt pork in a tin pan, fried in its own fat, with a hardtack biscuit you have to soak in coffee before your loose teeth can manage it. You chew on the left side. The coffee is boiled to tar. There is no milk. There has been no milk in your life since June. This is your body now. This is what 3 months of the diggings does to a man. And then you would step out of the tent and into Sacramento. In January of 1848, this place was a single adobe trading post on the bank of the river. Sutter's Embarcadero, a few sheds, and a landing. By the autumn of 1849, it is a city of roughly 10,000 men. Almost none of them are women. The mining country that autumn recorded fewer than 1 woman for every 30 men in some districts. The few women in Sacramento run boarding houses, laundries, and a small number of saloons. A clean shirt washed and pressed costs more than a steak. The streets are not streets. They are mud tracks between rows of canvas tents and hastily hammered clapboard. K Street and J Street have names but no surfaces. After the November rains begin, the mud will be knee-deep in places, and a mule will sink to its belly outside the post office. In January, the river will rise 20 feet and drown the lower town entirely. Nobody knows that yet. Most of the men around you will not be here when it happens. The smell hits you in layers. The first layer is wood smoke. Every cooking fire in camp burning green pine. The second is the latrine trenches, multiplied by 10,000. The third is the mules and oxen at the freight yard down by the Embarcadero. And the fourth is drying salt meat in barrels at the traders. Underneath all of it, faint and constant, is the smell of the river. And underneath that, and this is the part history rarely shows you, is the smell of men dying in their tents. By October of 1849, Sacramento's Placer Times newspaper had begun running death notices in columns 3 across, recording the dead by trade and by state of origin, because there was no other way to identify them. You walk past a tent with the flap tied shut and a tin cup hung outside the pole. The cup is the camp signal. Someone inside is too sick to come out. You slow down. A friend will check on him at noon. If he is still alive, the cup stays. If he is not, the cup comes down. The prices are written on a chalkboard outside the traders, and you read them every morning the way another man might read scripture. Eggs, $1 each, sometimes 2 if the boat is late. A loaf of bread, 75 cents. A pound of flour, 40 cents. A pair of boots, $30 to $40. A doctor's visit, when a doctor can be found, $16, payable in dust, with no guarantee that the man calling himself a doctor has ever seen the inside of a medical school. You earned $12 yesterday in gold dust. You will earn perhaps $15 today, if the claim is kind. You will spend 9 of them before sundown just to eat and sleep under canvas. By mid-morning, you would be standing in the river. The American River in October is the color of weak tea and runs cold enough to cramp a man's calf in 12 minutes. You stand in it to your thighs. Your trousers are soaked to the waist by 10 in the morning and will not fully dry until you sleep. You are working a rocker box, what the men in camp call a cradle, a wooden contraption on curved runners that you fill with gravel and rock back and forth while a partner pours river water through it. The heavier gold sinks. The gravel washes out. In a good hour, you might recover a quarter ounce. In a bad week, you recover almost nothing and move downstream. Your hands are in the water all day. They go numb at the wrist by noon. The cold is in your bones by 2. By 4 o'clock, you cannot button your own shirt without help. The man working beside you is named William. There were many Williams here, and one of them, William Swain of Youngstown, New York, left a written record that survives. He is 28. He has a wife and a daughter at home, and he has not seen them in 14 months. He has been losing weight steadily since August. He does not say so, but he has begun coughing at night. At noon, you eat what you ate at breakfast: salt pork, hardtack, coffee. Imagine for a moment eating the same 3 things twice a day for 90 days. Imagine your body on the 90th morning. There is no fresh meat unless someone shoots a deer, and there are fewer deer every week. There are no vegetables. There is no bread that is not made from flour that has crossed an ocean and a mountain range. The closest orange tree is 300 miles away in Los Angeles, and oranges, when they reach Sacramento at all, sell for $1 a piece. When a man falls sick, and by October every camp on the river has at least one, you would carry him back to his tent and send a boy down to Sacramento for the doctor. By the standards of 1849, the word doctor meant almost nothing. There were perhaps a dozen formally trained physicians in the entire mining country that autumn, scattered across hundreds of miles of diggings. The man who arrived at your camp would more often be a former dentist, or an apothecary's clerk, or a man who had read a single medical manual on the voyage out and now carried a leather bag of bottles. He would set the bag down by the bedroll. He would charge $16 in dust. He would do almost nothing useful. His treatments were calomel, mercury, for the fever and the flux, which made the patient's gums slough off and his teeth fall out, and sometimes killed him faster than the disease. Opium in a tincture called laudanum for pain, quinine for the ague, whiskey for everything else. There were no antibiotics. No one had yet proven that germs cause disease. Louis Pasteur was a young chemist in France and would not publish his germ theory work for another 15 years. If your tent mate had typhoid, the doctor could not save him. If he had dysentery, the doctor could not save him. If he had pneumonia, the doctor could not save him. The doctor knew this. You knew this. The patient, lying on his bedroll, knew this best of all. And then the light would begin to fail. Sundown in the diggings comes fast in October. The sun drops behind the western ridge by 6, and the temperature drops with it. You climb out of the river. Your legs do not feel like your own for the first 100 paces. You change into dry wool, if you have any, and if you do not, you sit by the fire in wet trousers and let the steam rise off you. Your hands begin to ache as they warm. This is the part of the day they have been numb for waiting to remind you they are still there. The camp gathers around the fires. There is whiskey, which costs $4 a bottle and is mostly water and something else. There are pipes. There are cards. Almost every man in camp gambles, because every man in camp is here to make money, and the river has not made enough of it for anyone today. You write a letter home. You hold the pencil between 2 cracked fingers and stop, and start again. You do not tell your mother about the cough in the tent next door. You do not tell your wife about the loose teeth, or the latrine trench, or the man buried last Tuesday under a board with his name burned into it. You tell her the country is beautiful, which is true. You tell her you are well, which is not. You tell her you will be home by spring, which you both want very badly to believe. The letter will reach her in March if the ship from San Francisco does not founder off Cape Horn. By 8 o'clock, the camp is quiet. You crawl back into your tent. The man in the next tent is still coughing. He has been coughing for 4 days. By the standards of 1849, this means he will probably be dead by Friday. And on Saturday morning, 2 of you will dig a grave 40 paces from the latrine, on the upslope side, and lay him in it without a coffin, because there is no lumber to spare. Someone will go through his pockets first, not to rob him, to find the address of his people. There will be a folded letter from a sister in Massachusetts, and a small daguerreotype of a woman, and a pocket watch on a brass chain. These will be wrapped in oilcloth and given to a man going down to San Francisco at the end of the month, who will pay the postage to send the packet east. It will arrive in Massachusetts in April. This is not a story. This is the regular bookkeeping of an 1849 mining camp. The diaries recorded in a single line: buried Tom this morning, shovels back at noon. And then the rocker boxes would begin again. In a farmhouse outside a small town in New York State, in the spring of 1850, a woman is sitting at a kitchen table. In front of her is a tin box, recently arrived. It has come a long way, by ship from San Francisco, by another ship from Panama, by a third up the Atlantic coast, by wagon from the New York docks. The lid is dented. The address is written in a stranger's hand. She does not open it right away. Inside the box is a pocket watch on a brass chain, a lock of dark hair tied with thread, a folded letter that begins, "Madam, it falls to me to write you of your son. She had a letter from him in February. He told her the country was beautiful. He told her he was well. He told her he would be home by spring. He is not coming home. He is buried in a grave 40 paces from a latrine on the bank of the American River, under a board with his name burned into it. And within 5 years the board will rot, and the river will rise, and there will be no marker at all." 80,000 men came to California in 1849. By contemporary estimate, 1 in 5 of them was dead within 6 months. They did not die in gunfights. They did not die in the kind of stories that get told. They died of salt pork and bad water and the simple absence of anyone who knew what to do. And the ones who lived kept digging. By the standards of 1849, this was a kind of courage so ordinary it did not have a name. A man stood in a cold river 12 hours a day, ate the same 3 things, slept in damp wool beside a man who was dying, and went back into the river the next morning. He did this for months. Many of them did it for years. We owe them, at the very least, the memory of what it actually cost.